Well, I tell people when they want to know what I do, is basically I design title sequences, and then they look strange, and what does that mean? And I'd say, well, I create the way the titles occur on the screen, and the backgrounds that they're over, and everything that happens that in those few minutes, I usually create. On occasions, of course, I'm given backgrounds to put titles over, but usually I will create the whole sequence. I fell in love with letters, with type, when I was very young, and I began sign painting with brush and paint, and painted signs for different companies for many years when I was a teenager. And then I began designing those letter forms into what are known as logos. And I worked for many companies doing logos. And then I learned that there was this little part of movie making where you could move your designs and play with them on film, and that was called titles. So I pursued working with people who were doing titles, and eventually I learned how to put my designs on film, because it's much more complicated than just putting it on paper. When you're dealing in motion, it's both expensive and complex. Well, I feel good title design touches you. The requirement of a title designer is to put the titles on the screen. There's legal contracts between the actors and the producers and the cameraman and so on. So one has to put them on the screen so they can be read and satisfy the contractual requirements. But in process, I bring design to it. So I try to find the characteristics of the film, the personality, the setting, the time frame, the story. I try to illustrate and reach out to the viewer and acclimate them to the movie that they've chosen to see. So it covers many areas, and I become a filmmaker when I'm doing all of these things, because I'll have an idea, I'll write it, I'll storyboard it, and decide how to shoot it. Then once I've shot it, I edit it and do visual effects and motion design and all those things, and work with the music. I don't do the music myself, but I work with the composer. So we synchronize the sound and the picture, and in all phases, I'm a full filmmaker. And what I deliver is a complete little film. Well, I did get a full design education, and I studied art direction, advertising design, and graphic design. But I never studied motion design or working in film until after I left school and began working in graphic design. And then I discovered quite accidentally this little part of filmmaking where one could apply their graphic design skills but be able to move your designs, which was very, very exciting. So it wasn't planned. I'd always intended to be agency art director and direct art and design art, but never in film until I discovered that. And once that happened, I had no interest in doing just graphic design. I learned of Saul Bass very fortunately from my teacher in my high school classes, who had been an agency art director. She worked on Madison Avenue in New York City, and for many years she was a professional art director. And then when her husband died, she came into teaching. She came to Los Angeles, and she became a teacher, and I fortunately had her as my teacher for 5 years. And she showed all of us in the classes, all the professional designers, all of the agencies that did art direction and design advertisements and ads and things for companies. So I learned of Saul Bass. His work was in all the publications that she showed us. And I began studying him, and I loved what he did, and I started trying to do the kind of things that he did. And then I learned that his offices were right there in Los Angeles where I lived. So I went to his offices attempting to meet him and to show him my work, and I was very pursuing of him and determined to meet him. And finally, one day I did, and he looked at my work and he saw something about me that he thought had promise. And so he began mentoring me. And I would visit him regularly, and he wanted to see what I was doing, and he kept track of and advised me and guided me. Well, I'm known to not have a style. Many of my competitors have a particular way of treating type or rhythms and notions that they bring to, but you can tell that it's them. You can tell because they do things over and over because they like it and they think it's good design, and it probably is. But I tend to want to serve the film, and whatever the film needs is what I'll bring to it. I'm not caring about style, because that's not why I'm working on it. I'm there to enhance the film and present the titles, but coordinate them with the storytelling. And so since each film is different, each of my designs is different, and therefore people say, I can never tell that you did that, because you always do what's best for the movie, not what's best for you. Probably, certainly Star Wars would have been. I was working for a number of years before I did Star Wars, and I'd worked on a handful of very fine films that were successful, and I was known for my work. But with Star Wars being such a blockbuster, such a revolution in filmmaking and storytelling, and the excitement and the success of it to the audience, to the public, it simply launched me to a higher level. And then I had opportunities to do things that I didn't have previously. Well, overall, my relationship with Martin Scorsese has been quite successful. So the films I've done with him are the ones that I think are the most successful of my work, and in particular, I think probably Taxi Driver would be the one that I'm proudest of. Well, of course, it varies from one film to the other. Some filmmakers, seemingly more than before, realize the value of having my input early on in their film. For example, on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg asked me to design a logo for the film before we even began shooting. So it became a symbol for the film. It was a light, a beacon that the crew and the cast could follow and be part of, which was very wise of him to identify the film early on. And then as they promoted the film during the making of it and afterward, there was a common image that everyone recognized. So it was very good to do that. But usually I'm brought in to work on the film while they're editing. So they've finished shooting, they're starting to put the film together, they're calling their composer in and their sound effects people and so on. That's when I come in and see the film and then do my work along parallel to them for 2 or 3 months usually. And during that time, sometimes the film will change because they're editing and changing and trying things and asking people to look at it. So something that I might offer as a design might be really good for it at that point, but maybe a month later, it's not as good. So I have to change along with it and offer other ideas. It's a work in progress all the way to the end. So it keeps it exciting. Quite positively, working in film, with film and processing and all the equipment that's quite primitive, took a long time, and it was fraught with danger. You could very easily make a mistake, or the film got dirty, scratched, or the camera didn't work right. I mean, all kinds of problems that were regularly a part of the process. where digital is so precise and so quick, and you can do all kinds of different versions and refer back to them, and it can do many more things that you can imagine, where there was a severe limitation to what the equipment could do in film. So I embraced the digital methods very early on, and found that they were very beneficial for my approach to design. And I couldn't imagine doing without it. Although oddly, the last couple of films I worked on, the directors shot their film on film rather than shooting it digitally. So they wanted me to finish the film with my title work the way I used to do, with film cameras and film equipment, so as to be pure and consistent to the medium that they shot their film on. But that's not so easy to do now, because most of the equipment is gone. The technicians who worked on it and who I worked with are mostly retired or doing other things, so it wasn't possible to do that. But I see the digital process as a tool, just the way the camera equipment were tools. So it's how you use them that makes the difference. It's still about the idea. Without the idea, you can't do anything. And I still think like I'm doing it on film because of the restraints that I've always had. But then I can execute an idea with the restrictions that I have in my mind from working on film, and then I realize, well, I could do that too, where I couldn't do this on film. So it allows me to broaden my horizons and do many things that I wasn't able to do on film. For me, it's everything, yes. I rely completely on my instincts and my emotions. So when I view the film, I then simply wait for me to speak to myself, for an idea to come through from wherever it comes from to my mind, so I can then imagine something. It's all organic, and it's a mystery. I don't know even how it happens, but it keeps happening. I keep having ideas, not only one idea, but I always have many ideas. So it's very exciting to deal with all of this and funnel it to a place where I can realize it in a very comprehensive way and then present it to the director. Well, as for pursuing the work, we all know it's a difficult field to work in. And it's hard to find people who will listen to you and look at your work. But that's the only way it happens. You know, dealing people to people, from one person to another. So my advice is generally to simply persist. Just keep trying to find someone who will listen to your ideas, to the things that you have to say, the expressions you have to make, the ideas that you want to share. And that won't happen unless you persist. You just keep at it, and finally you'll break through.